Hush! The Quiet Intake, Chapter 1. When Mara Bell returned to Alder Clinic, the chairs in the intake room were the wrong color. She stopped in the doorway, with one hand still on the brass handle, and looked at them long enough that the receptionist glanced up. The chairs had always been blue vinyl. She remembered the shine on the cracked seams, the way her mother used to smooth the seat of her skirt before she sat down, the small, wet hiss when she shifted her weight. Today the chairs were upholstered in a pale gray fabric that looked expensive and impossible to clean. Someone had arranged them in a perfect square around a low table holding a bowl of white mints. "Miss Bell," the receptionist said, "you can check in here." Mara crossed the room. The floor gave off the same citrus and bleach smell it had every year of her life, but something underneath it was new. Dust heated by fluorescent light. Dry paper. A room opened after being sealed. "You changed the waiting area?" The receptionist smiled without looking at the room. "Not recently." Mara set her bag on the counter. "Since last spring, then?" "No," the woman said, still smiling. "These have been here for years." It was a small correction, polite. The kind of thing that should have dropped to the floor and died there. Instead, it lodged behind Mara's ribs. She gave her name and date of birth. The receptionist typed with 2 steady fingers, then slid a clipboard through the opening in the glass. "Annual family follow-up," she said. Mara looked down at the top page. The form had her address, her emergency contact, and her insurance details pre-filled. Near the bottom, under Family History Review, a box had been checked in blue ink. "Mother present for intake." Mara tapped it with one fingernail. "This is wrong." The receptionist glanced down. "No, that's standard. My mother died 11 months ago." For the first time, the woman's face changed, not to grief, to mild administrative inconvenience. "I'm sorry for your loss. You can note any updates in the margin." Mara stood very still. Her mother had been the one who kept these appointments going long after they stopped making sense. Annual screenings, baseline tests, review consultations no one could explain. The clinic never treated anything visible. It collected details, recorded answers, compared one year to the next. Her mother used to say it was easier to keep going than to find out what happened if you stopped. After the funeral, Mara had almost called to cancel every future visit. Instead, she had kept today's appointment because there was a box in her mother's dresser filled with Alder Clinic receipts going back 22 years. And because the last receipt had been dated 3 days after her mother was buried. She uncapped the attached pen and crossed out the line with a hard black stroke. Under it she wrote, "Deceased." The receptionist watched her do it. "Dr. Vale may ask follow-up questions." "About my dead mother?" "About consistency," the woman said, and took the clipboard back. The intake room opened off a short hallway with frosted glass panels and framed prints of marsh grass in winter. Mara had walked it so many times that she usually kept her head down. Today she noticed small things. The print nearest room 3 hung half an inch lower than the others. A water stain the size of a hand darkened one ceiling tile above the nurse's station. A locked cabinet at the end of the hall stood slightly open, enough to show a stack of tape recorders inside. Tape recorders. Mara slowed. Alder Clinic used tablets now, didn't it? It had used tablets last year. She remembered signing her name on a screen that made her mother's finger look thin and blue. A nurse in pale green scrubs appeared from room 2. "Miss Bell?" She was younger than Mara expected, with glossy hair pulled into a knot so tight it lifted the corners of her eyes. Her badge read S. Hollis. "I'm Summer. Come with me." The intake room was windowless and too bright. A paper sheet covered the exam chair. On the counter sat a blood pressure cuff, a digital thermometer, and one of the tape recorders Mara had seen in the cabinet. It was small and black, and unmistakably old. A red light blinked at the top. "What's that for?" Mara asked. Summer closed the door behind them. "Recording intake." "You didn't do that last year." "We did." Mara let out a soft laugh she didn't mean. "No, you had a tablet." Summer's expression remained composed. "We'll begin with routine questions." She took Mara's pulse, blood pressure, temperature. Her hands were gentle and cool. She asked about sleep, appetite, work stress, dizziness, chest tightness, changes in medication. Mara answered automatically until Summer said, "How many appointments did your mother miss this quarter?" Mara looked up from the blood pressure printout she had been pretending to read. "What?" Summer repeated the question in the same tone. "None," Mara said. "Because she was dead." Summer made a note on a paper chart, not a tablet. Paper, with carbon copies underneath. "Before that then?" "I don't know." "Try your best." Mara watched the recorder's red light pulse. "Why are you asking me this?" "Because last spring you reported concern about missed compliance." "I didn't." Summer wrote something else. Her pen moved smoothly, as though she were following text already there. The fluorescent lights gave a faint insect buzz. Mara became aware of the mirror above the sink to her left. It showed the side of her face, the white wall, the corner of the recorder. When she lifted her hand to brush hair off her neck, her reflection lagged, just enough for her to doubt it. Not a delay she could prove, just a wrongness, like a skipped breath. "Can I hear what you're recording?" she asked. Summer capped her pen. "At the end of intake, if requested." "I'm requesting it now." Summer stood. "Dr. Vale will discuss records access with you." She opened the door and left before Mara could answer. Mara sat alone in the light. She listened for voices outside the room and heard none. The tape recorder kept blinking. She told herself not to perform for it, not to let an object decide the shape of her fear. Then she leaned toward it and said clearly, "My mother is dead. She has been dead since June 17th. If your records say she was here after that, your records are wrong." The red light continued its patient blink. On the counter beside the sink lay a stack of forms clipped together. Summer had left them face down, but the top page had slipped. Mara could see her own name printed in the header, and beneath it, appointment companion, Elaine Bell, her mother's name. Mara stood so quickly the paper on the exam chair crackled like a shout. She pulled the forms toward her. There were 6 pages. Weight history, contact verification, medication reconciliation, family observation notes. The handwriting changed from line to line, but one phrase repeated across all of them in separate hands. Patient corrects details inconsistently when separated from mother. On the final page, under behavioral markers, someone had written, "When alone, patient notices room changes." The air in the intake room seemed to contract. Mara put the pages back exactly where she had found them. Then she slid the top sheet far enough to reveal the date printed underneath, today's date. Below that, another line. "Repeat if patient asks for recording." The handle moved. Mara stepped away from the counter and sat, just as Dr. Vale entered. He was in his 60s, silver-haired, wearing a charcoal tie that matched nothing else in the room. Mara remembers him only vaguely from earlier years. A man who listened with his head tipped to one side, as if every answer were passing through static. "Miss Bell," he said, "I'm sorry to keep you waiting." He sat on the rolling stool and folded his hands. Summer stood near the door with the chart. I understand there's some distress around the family review. Your intake form says my mother is present. Present in file, he said. Not in person. That isn't what it says. Language is sometimes inefficient. Mara heard herself laugh again, quietly this time. You can probably do better than that. Your mother participated in a long continuity program here. Some records remain linked by design. Including future ones? Including active ones. She thought of the receipt dated after the funeral, folded in the dresser box at home. Why was there a charge on her card 3 days after she died? Summer shifted almost invisibly near the door. Dr. Vale did not. Because your mother chose not to interrupt continuity, he said. Mara stared at him. Do you hear yourself? I do. Would you like to review today's intake audio? She had almost forgotten it. Yes. Summer lifted the recorder, pressed a button, and set it back down. A burst of static filled the room. Then a voice emerged, Summer's, calm and bright. How many appointments did your mother miss this quarter? Mara heard her own answer, thin with disbelief. None, because she was dead. Then over the next hiss of tape, another voice entered. It was her mother's, not an imitation, not a suggestion. Elaine Bell's exact low cadence, worn soft at the edges by years of cigarette smoke she always denied. She's been forgetting small things again, the voice said. Only when I'm out of the room. Mara stood so abruptly, the exam chair rolled backward into the wall. No, she said. Summer reached for the recorder, but Dr. Vale lifted a finger, and she stopped. The tape continued. Mara's own voice came next, but not from a moment she remembered. The chairs were blue, it said. Her recorded voice sounded younger somehow, exhausted and furious. They keep changing them when I blink. Elaine Bell answered from somewhere inside the hiss. No, sweetheart. They're gray. They have always been gray. The tape clicked off. For a second Mara could hear only the lights. What is this? She asked. The words came out raw. Where did you get that? Dr. Vale's eyes held hers with a kind of tired kindness she found worse than cruelty. From your last intake. I was not here with my mother last spring. You were. She was dead. Yes, he said. Summer lowered her gaze to the chart, as if this were the expected difficult part of the appointment. Mara backed toward the door. Open it. The mirror over the sink caught her again. In it, the room looked fractionally wrong. The counter longer. The recorder closer to the edge. Summer's reflection facing not the chart in her hands, but Mara herself. Dr. Vale spoke carefully, the way people do around animals they mean to corner without a struggle. Grief can create rigid memories. Continuity helps us soften them before they calcify. You build a dead woman. Your mother understood the value of staying in the record. The phrase hit Mara harder than anything else. Staying in the record, as if the clinic were not preserving health, but occupancy. As if a person could be kept active on paper long enough to make the body optional. She lunged for the door. Summer moved late, almost lazily, because she seemed certain there was nowhere to go. Mara got the handle down and tore the door open into the hallway. The corridor outside was empty, not quiet, empty in a way that felt staged. No phones ringing, no printer hum, no cough from a distant room. The marsh grass prints were gone. In their place hung mirrors in matching silver frames, each reflecting a brighter hallway than the one she stood in. At the far end, the cabinet door now stood wide open. Inside were not tape recorders, but labeled archive boxes, stacked floor to ceiling. Each white spine bore a patient name in neat black type. Bell Elaine, Bell Mara, Belle, Mara, and Elaine. Summer said something behind her. Dr. Vale's stool wheels scraped the floor. Mara ran to the cabinet before she could think better of it and pulled the nearest box free. It was lighter than she expected. Inside were cassette tapes, intake forms, insurance statements, birthday cards, grocery lists, school attendance slips, a photocopy of her first driver's license, her mother's signature on pages Mara had never seen. Whole years flattened and filed, lives reduced to documents that could be reordered at will. At the bottom of the box lay a slim cassette in a cracked plastic case. A label had been typed onto the spine. Intake 1, companion added after. Mara stared at the words without understanding them. Then understanding came all at once, clean and terrible. Her mother had not been keeping Mara in the clinic's program. The clinic had been keeping Mara in her mother's. And at some point, perhaps years ago, it had decided the file worked better if the dead remained available. Summer was closer now. Please put that back. Mara looked up. In the mirror across the hallway, her reflection was still crouched at the open box. Only the reflection was not alone. Her mother stood behind it, with one hand resting lightly on Mara's shoulder, as if she had been there the entire time, waiting for Mara to notice the room had changed.